Good evening and welcome to this West Orange Board of Education Public Board meeting, this August 30th, 2021, officially calling this meeting to order. Good evening, Dr. Cascone, members of the board, and Mrs. Flowers. Would you kindly do roll call, please?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Roll call. Mrs. Welter,
Here.
Mrs. Merklinger,
Here.
Mr. Rothstein,
Here.
Vice President Tunnicliffe,
Here.
President Trigg-Scales.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to ask the board, Dr. Cascone, Mrs. Flowers, and those in attendance tonight, and those who are at home, to please join me in a moment of silence as we reflect on the loss of our service people in Afghanistan, and also to think about those people in Haiti who are suffering, and to also think about the residents of Louisiana as they are affected by Hurricane Ida. Thank you. All right, I'd like to entertain a motion for consideration of the closed and public meeting minutes of August 16th, 2021, which is attachment 1.
All motion.
Thank you, Ms. Merklinger. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliffe. Any discussion? There being none, Mrs. Flowers, would you kindly do a roll call?
Mrs. Welter,
Yes.
Mrs. Merklinger,
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
Vice President Tunnicliffe,
Yes.
President Trigg-Scales.
Yes.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to the superintendent and board reports. And Dr. Cascone is presenting a back to school update. Dr. Cascone.
Thank you, President Trigg-Scales, and good evening, members of the board, Ms. Flowers, and members of the public here with us tonight and watching on YouTube. So before I get into the just kind of a bit of a school reopening update, just wanted to kind of do a few other informational points. Things are picking up. A lot of movement, positive movement in the last week or two. This week in particular, today we had our first day of our new teacher and new staff orientation. Excited to receive our new folks and professionals. We'll continue with that tomorrow. Had the opportunity to greet them today and say a few words to them today. It's an outstanding group of professionals who will be joining us at this critical time in our history and in our school district. We've also had a number of student orientations. I had the pleasure of attending 2 last week at Edison School and here at the high school for the 9th grade orientation. The kids were terrific. They were excited about coming back, and I really enjoyed addressing them and speaking to them and interacting with them. So I want to thank the staff and the administration for putting together great programs, and to our parents, guardians, and caretakers at Edison School for attending. And if you were in attendance, just by making time in your schedule to make sure that your children were able to get here to participate in those important events. Tomorrow, we will have the first day, the first session of our the vaccine clinic, which we are offering here in town in collaboration with the West Orange Department of Health and the county, the Essex County. We have approximately 50 people signed up for the clinic. And so I will be there, as well as our district physician, to oversee that, and appreciate all those who signed up for that. Talk a little bit about the executive order, which has come down with the mandating of vaccines or weekly testing for staff. Since that order came in, we've been working diligently to understand what our systems and processes will be for receiving that information, for archiving it, as well as providing testing services, access to testing services to make that as efficient as and effective as possible for those people who may need it. I should also mention that one of the critical criteria by which we are evaluating potential testing providers and partners is the capacity to be able to offer that service to people above and beyond our staff. So whether that be township officials, obviously whether that'll be parents or students. I did learn that there will be testing offered at the Kmart in town, but in the event that we needed to be able to provide parents with a quick option, which they would need to get in order to have their child return to school. That's a part of what we plan to do through this provider. So we will have more information on that, but we've made good progress, both in the manner by which we'll collect that information and also in doing some research with potential testing providers. So one final piece before I get into the report is I'm happy to report, and you may have heard me talk about this and write about it in previous updates. We had brought together a school theme think tank to come up with a few options, and we put the choices out. And so thankful we had almost 1,500 people respond to the survey, which is a pretty nice response rate. And I am happy to report that our school year theme for next year that was chosen by approximately 45% of the respondents was return, reconnect, and reimagine. So we will continue to come back to those words. We will continue to seek to make connections to those. And there will be a surprise for the opening day of school relative to that, which I'm not at liberty to divulge at this time, but I think it'll be a great way to kick off the year with our theme in a way we can remain one way united in our efforts this year, and what will certainly be an exciting and unprecedented year. And so with that, I would transition into the school reopening update. And I want to just provide some context for how this is going to work. When I was attending ninth grade orientation, I kind of, I kneeled down and I was talking with a few of the freshmen, and they were asking me some great questions about what they could expect in school. And it occurred to me at that moment, as I was talking with the students, that perhaps I've done a good job of communicating to the parent community, the guardians and the caretakers, and perhaps they have the answers to many of their questions. But what do our students know? To what extent have the students had access to those same letters and those same presentations? And so it's really with a critical eye on our students that I speak tonight. What I'm going to do is sort of walk through the day for a student from the moment if they take transportation, get on the bus, to the moment they get on the bus to leave at the end of the day. I promise it will not be 8 hours, President Trigg Scales, members of the board. It will not be the full length of a school day, I promise you. But what we will later do is we'll clip this portion of the meeting into a video and link that to then subsequently send to our entire community, including our students, posted on social media. And then, as opposed to having to read through volumes of paper and letters and things of that nature, you can simply watch it. Now, I will tell you that I do intend before the end of the week to kind of send out a sort of an abbreviated version of that with kind of key points, like quick access informational points for parents and students. But without further ado, I will present to you what the day in the life of a student will look like, and I'll make qualifications from time to time if it might be different for elementary, middle school, or high school. I think that one of the students said it best after I had gone through these questions and answered them, said to me, "So it's normal school with masks." I said, yeah, you know what? With some qualifications, that is essentially what it is. So if I'm a student that's being transported, if I get on a bus, you report to your regularly scheduled bus stop. Obviously, since you are outside at the bus stop, you're not obliged to wear a mask, though you should be mindful of social distancing when you're at that bus stop. You will be required to wear a mask to get on the bus. And if you did not have a mask with you, if you'd forgotten it for some reason, the bus drivers will have masks that they can provide for you to get onto the bus. The buses will be, in most cases, at full occupancy. But again, students will be wearing masks on the bus, and the windows will remain open as much as possible, weather permitting, to ensure ventilation, even during the coldest of months. And even during times where there might be some precipitation outside, the windows will remain at least partially open to ensure that there is some fresh air intake into the bus. When arriving at school, you'll enter the school as you would in a typical school year. If there are specific entrances which principals have determined you'll come in, that information would have already been shared with you, but typically you will enter as you would have in a normal school year getting off the bus. One difference is that, at least at this point in time, we will not be doing thermal screenings to enter in the building. In speaking with our health advisory board, they have shared with us that at this time, as our community remains in the moderate range, we can feel comfortable not doing the thermal screenings. That being said, as with many of the things we're doing this year, if the level of community transmission rises into the higher levels, that might be an additional safety protocol that we need to put in place. But at this time, we will not be doing that. So you will enter the school. There will obviously be staff at the entranceways, and there'll be staff in the hallways to kind of monitor what's going on. There will be a decaling on the floors of the hallways to try and control the flow of traffic in either direction. We want to try and eliminate as much as possible the commingling and intermingling and mixing that occurs in the hallways. And you'll go to your classroom. In your classroom, what you can expect is that the distancing will be as much as possible, right? We know that all of our classes are different. The student enrollment in each class is different. Some classes are small. So in an AP class, an advanced placement class of 10 students, spacing of 3 or even 6 feet might be feasible. In classes that have 20 to 25 students, it might be 3 feet or less. However, masks will be worn at all time in the classrooms. All of our classrooms, particularly on the secondary level, will have alcohol-based wipes, which students will be asked to wipe their tabletop down or their technology device down before utilizing it. And of course, we also will have hand sanitizing stations in all the classrooms. What goes on in the classroom, students, will look very much like it has in pre-pandemic years. There'll be pair work, there'll be group work. In labs and science, you'll be moving to your lab tables and things of that nature. Certainly, there'll be times when you might be seated in rows in your classroom, but that certainly will not be all the time. It won't be any more than it has been in a typical year. So whether you're a kindergarten student or whether you're a 12th grade student, actually our kindergarten students wouldn't have any frame of reference of what they did previously, Mr. Rothstein. But let's say, and even the first grades, any student that's been in a public school in the school before, prior to the pandemic, it will look like that, much like that, in the classroom. So let's talk about lunch for a moment. Obviously we're able to offer students both breakfast and lunch. All of our lunch and breakfast servings, at least at the beginning of the year until we get our feet under us, so to speak, will be grab and go. So there will be locations in the school, multiple locations in the school, where there will be grab and go lunches, cold lunches and cold breakfasts, which students will take. Now, over the course of the last several weeks, the principals have been working on how do we feed our students in our school, recognizing that they need to be 6 feet apart when eating, or 3 feet apart with a barrier. And so all summer, they've been working on this jigsaw puzzle of this is how many students we have eating at this time. Okay. And here's the spatial requirements. Can we utilize only the space we've used previously? In many cases, there are multiple locations in the school where students will eat and will be assigned to eat. And at times that could very well be outside. But the overall thing you need to understand is that we will serve, and students will be safely distanced apart while eating. When at all possible, we will attempt to pod students or keep students eating with the same students so that we can facilitate contact tracing. And all spaces in which students will eat in school will be sanitized in between sessions when there are multiple cohorts eating in the same space. There's been a number of questions about physical education, about band and chorus, because obviously one thinks about how can we do these activities safely. So let's talk about physical education for a moment. First off, you should know that in the levels of the school district where students would typically use locker rooms, that will not be the case. Students will be allowed to drop their belongings in the locker room. They'll be able to use the bathroom in the locker room if necessary, but we will not have large groups of students changing in the locker rooms. And so obviously students on days when they have gym should account for that in terms of wearing clothing that would be comfortable to participate in gym. Also recognizing that students aren't going to be able to change. Our physical education supervisor and teachers are keeping a critical eye on physical activities, that might minimize, represent exertion and exercise, but at the same time, not lead to people being, drenched in sweat going back to their class. These will be some of the considerations that are made. But how will we facilitate the gymnasium environment during a physical education class? Well, let me paint you kind of an overall scenario for this. So imagine students are engaging in a obstacle course activity, okay? An activity where there's only one or two athletes or participants that are participating simultaneously, but both are spaced from each other and both are spaced from their classmates who are waiting to do that activity. While those students are engaging in that activity, their mask would be off. The students that were waiting on the line to go to participate in the activity, masks on. Mask comes off to exert, go to a section of the gym where you can be socially distanced to catch your breath before putting the mask back on, mask goes back on. That's overall how that'll be approached. But there'll also be where you'll have two students that are 20 feet apart, that may be kicking a soccer ball or maybe throwing a baseball or something of that nature. A critical eye will be placed on ensuring that we can maintain that distancing in that environment so it's safe. Band and chorus. As much distancing as possible, masks while singing, bell covers on instruments, masks on when not playing. Okay, so that's how we'll approach. And whenever we're able to use outside spaces for band and chorus, that will be done. We will have late buses, 2 late buses at the middle school, 2 late buses at the high school. I should be frank about this, though, Board Member Huerta, that there's a driver shortage right now. And so in as much as we want to look at the ideal times that we're running late buses, we also have to recognize that we might have to stagger those buses at such a time that we can run them with the available resources we have from a driver standpoint. And that was not only for our own core of drivers, but also our vendor with which we work, which is 100 ESC. But we will offer those, and the same protocols will be applied to those buses as well. So let's talk about what happens in the event of quarantine. Right. I think that's probably really one of the big questions that's on people's minds. As the executive order indicates, we can offer virtual home instruction in several cases. One is obviously if the student needs to quarantine, and that could be for travel, that could be for close contact. The other is if that student is deemed to be having a pre-existing medical condition that puts them at particularly high risk of developing complications if getting COVID. Those are really the only reasons we would have, the only justifications we have for offering it. So if you are required to quarantine, you will be able to view the classroom from home through Google Classroom. The teacher will provide follow-up supports and activities through the Google Classroom platform. This is a relatively short timeline, right? So we would approach it in much the same way we would approach it if a student were out of school in a brick and mortar model. In this case, it would be even more beneficial to the student because they would actually be privy to what was going on in class. Certainly, we know that for our secondary school students, that's a much more comfortable modality, even upper elementary school. And as we get into lower age students, the level of hands-on support we might have to provide for the student will go up. We also know, and actually I can thank Mr. Vine. Is that you, Mr. Viney, in the audience? I can thank Mr. Viney, actually, in conversation I had with Mr. Viney, who's also an administrator in a public school district, that we need to be mindful of students' social emotional well-being while they're on quarantine. Last year, perhaps it was a bit different because not everybody was in school, but now being quarantined at home while the vast majority of your classmates are in school participating in activities can be even more of an isolating experience. So we need to be ensuring that we're keeping social emotional, for lack of a better word, tabs on those students while they're home. But that's what they would learn virtually from home through Google Classroom. If you are a student who ends up receiving a medical exemption, that student could expect a far more hands-on approach beyond simply having a window into the classroom through Google Meets. And that could take a variety of different forms. It's not a boilerplate approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but the district is committed to any student that's home for a medical exemption to providing, aligned with the governor's order, instruction commensurate with in-person instruction. In terms of getting access to technology, Mr. Santiago, our director of technology, has established a pickup point at the high school. I do believe that he is going to be communicating that out if he has not already. It's going to be in a different location than it was previously. It had been in the cafeteria, but obviously now we're going to be using the cafeteria. So there's a little office space with an outside door in proximity to the cafeteria that will enable parents to come pick up a unit without actually having to enter the building. And he will be putting out information relative to that process. But I think if you're a parent, if you're informed that your child needs to quarantine, the best point of contact remains either the building principal or the guidance counselor. And obviously they can steer you through that process. And listen, at the end of the day, if we need to actually deliver a Chromebook to someone's house, we have no problem doing that. We've done it in the past and we'll do it again. We'll get the students what they need in order that instruction continues. And that will not be counted as an absence. You will be noted as students as present virtual will be the code in the system for that. And that would essentially bring you to the end of the day. You would exit the school in the same manner in which you entered. You would get on your bus. You would be dropped off home, and that would be your day. So again, it's going to look and feel very much like a typical school day. And again, at the end of the week, I will put out sort of a what you would want to call it, really just a written document that's not filled with text, but just gives you kind of succinct explanations for some of the key scenarios you might encounter, most notably if your child had to quarantine and had to go into virtual instruction. So I think that covers it. I'm sure the board will have a lot of good questions. We do have some from the public as well. And so this will be helpful to refine the presentation.
Dr. Cascone.
You're very welcome.
And we'll start with Mrs. Huerta. Questions for Dr. Cascone?
Thank you, Dr. Cascone. Thank you, President Trigg-Scales, and thank you to the public that's here. Just one question.
Yes, ma'am.
Promise. We talked about technology. Will hotspots be available for our families still?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, we will have those as well. And in fact, the hotspots that we distributed last year have remained in play, if you will. But yes, anyone that might need Wi-Fi access would have access to that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And actually one more that I just.
It's okay. Good questions.
For the medically fragile children or students,
Mhm.
do we have something written that fits those requirements, or is it a case-by-case basis and the parents should reach out to the principal, or how do parents go about finding out if their child is eligible for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, so parents have been reaching out to principals. They've been reaching out to me, and, we've been responding. Typically, I've been responding to them personally and sharing with them what that process is. Basically, the process necessitates that the parents submit a letter from their physician, as well as a signed written release for their physician to speak with our district physician, Dr. Kelly. What will ensue is an interactive process between the two physicians. And provided that there is medical consensus between the two physicians that the child should be educated at home due to a pre-existing medical condition, then we will approve that arrangement and move forward with understanding exactly how we're going to get that done for that child.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta and Mrs. Merklinger.
Sure, thank you. Just a few questions. So for our students that are not taking the bus, so those that are maybe in before and after care, can you speak a little bit to what that would look like for those students?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mrs. Merklinger. Yes, in fact, coincidentally, we convened a meeting today with the elementary principals who host before and after programs in their schools and the directors of those provider programs. And so those before and after care programs will function from the standpoint of times exactly as they have previously, obviously with all of the corresponding health and safety protocols in place. I do understand that those programs are still enrolling students. But yeah, those will operate in all the schools that they previously had and according to the previous schedules.
Great. That's very helpful, I think, for a lot of our community members that utilize those programs. So that's good to know. During the day, I know there were some questions and some concern because students will be wearing masks, the classrooms maybe get a little bit warm.
Yeah.
Will students be allowed to have bottles of water with them throughout the course of the day? And what are there logistics around mask breaks that we might expect for students in their classroom, or was that more of a school by school, principal by principal basis?
It's a good question. The intention is that students will have opportunities over the course of the school day to take their masks off, whether it be during lunch, whether it be during physical education. Students certainly can take mask breaks when necessary. For example, a student can request to go to the bathroom, can go into the hallway, can take their mask down if necessary. So certainly students can request that. In terms of the elementary schools, same thing, which is that students will have opportunities to take them off over the course of the school day, can request it. I should mention, and I didn't mention it in my report, and that just came to mind as far as snack goes. So for going into the school year, we have established that for kindergarten and first grade, we are definitively building snack time in for those students. We're going to evaluate the feasibility of doing it in the older elementary grades to understand what kind of time that represents away from instruction. Obviously, we know that's going to be the case with kindergarten and first grade, but I think we've agreed that the overall benefit for those littles of having that time for snack outweighs the other piece. We also know that you can make learning anywhere with kindergartners and first graders, right? You can make the walk outside for the snack a learning opportunity and pointing out colors that they're observing, counting, things of that nature. So that'll be opportunities for our littles. I think in terms of excessive heat, that's going to be very problematic. And I think that, we've knocked this around in a variety of different ways, but I think if we have days that are excessively hot, and we're forecasting them to be excessively hot, we very well will probably have to call early dismissals. I don't believe that there's any other way to safely do that in school. So pray for a cool September. We had knocked some ideas around of trying to operate school in different locations on hot days, but I think in the event that we have excessively hot days, we're just going to have to call an early dismissal on those days.
So with that, I know at our last meeting, you mentioned about the tents that we'll be
Mhm.
utilizing.
Yeah.
Is that still the plan? And will students, when they're outside, be able to take the masks off if they're socially distanced? And
Absolutely. And I can't necessarily speak to exactly how each principal is going to be using them. What I can speak to in complete transparency, if you're wondering like, well, when are they going up? Well, I just spoke with our director of buildings and grounds today, and the freight did come into the New Jersey hub. They broke it down into smaller pallets and they shipped us the tents, load 1 of 2, and left load 2 of 2 at the hub, which has all the hardware and all the brackets. So last I checked with Mr. Semino, he was following up with them like every hour on the hour, and expressing the urgency that they need to be here absolutely no later than Friday so that we can get them up for next week. But they are in and going up. Now I should say that our intention is we had explored the possibility of adding some heat to those. There really is no safe way, according to the fire marshal, to do that.
Yeah.
So these would likely be structures that would only remain up as long as it's really feasible to be outside. Some principals may keep them up throughout the winter, but it's important to realize that we would have to take them down in the event of extreme snowfall. So they will probably only remain up through November,
Okay.
late November.
So just 2 more questions. In terms of, I know you had also mentioned at our last meeting that you're going to be meeting with your
Advisory board.
advisory board, the medical advisory board, and you were to meet with some folks that have been very involved with the allergies. How will that look for lunches with allergies? I know it's grab and go, so I'm assuming, and I think Mashio said this last time, that the lunches are, I'm gonna say allergy friendly?
Yeah, allergy friendly. But also in the spaces where where lunch or breakfast is being served, the same protocols, health and safety protocols we've had in place previously would be in place in terms of nut-free tables and things of that nature.
Okay, great. And then the last question has to do with the travel piece of the quarantine. Whether it's students and or faculty, how will that be monitored? I know there's been a lot of discussion on the honesty piece of it. And how do we handling that from a school district perspective, whether it's faculty and or students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no substitute for honesty, right? And I don't know if there's any way to protect against if people are going to. I'm an optimist, Ms. Merklinger. I believe in people, and so I do think that that the vast majority of people would not consider doing that. I think if someone is going to, make a decision that sort of wantonly endangers the health and safety of their classmates or their fellow community members, I'm not sure how you can really protect against that, other than to just recognize that we're not taking a hard line on travel quarantine. We could do that. We could say, well, if you travel, you're absent, and you make the work up when you come back. We haven't done that, and that's really sort of a show of good faith to say we'd rather you be honest, and know that we're gonna educate you while you're quarantined for travel reasons. And I think the same thing goes for staff. I just got an email from a principal this week where the parent was forthright, had emailed and said, listen, we're going to be back in town on the 3rd, so I forgot the child's name, was not going to be able to be in until the 13th, and they were forthright with that. So I do think that the vast majority of people are going to do the right thing. There's really no way we can really enforce it. So
Thank you. That was it.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Merklinger. And Mr. Rothstein?
Thank you. That was a very thorough walkthrough of the school day, and I agree. It sounds like regular school with masks. So that being the case, I'll continue the focus on masks. Um, So I would imagine it's got to be more difficult for teachers to read the faces of their students when they're
Yeah.
able to see so little of it. Are you aware of, I don't know whether we've had training for our faculty or whether there is training available to mitigate that? And if there is, if that's something that we could look into in the SDL department?
I'm not aware of it, but I think it's an excellent suggestion.
Could you repeat that again? My wife is watching.
No, I mean, you raise a great point, which is, how do you, right, like, so when you're setting up your classroom, when you're establishing protocols in your classroom with your students, is there, because you can't read their face, establishing signals with your students, for affirmation, for, whatever the case may be. It's a good point.
Sure, yeah. I think especially for younger students, it can be a matter of not feeling well or feeling a little sad. For older students, it gets a little more complicated, I understand, but I'm no expert, but any ways to maybe get
Oh.
some techniques to work around that would be great.
I understand. I misunderstood you initially. Gotcha. In other words, that the masks could be literally masking a child that's in crisis or distress or something of that nature and wouldn't necessarily know.
Sure, and the teacher's ability to read that and normally would be able to go to the student and say quietly, are you feeling okay today? Is there something you need to talk about? And that's just a missed opportunity right now.
I think this is a good example of leveraging our existing capacity because an experience of teachers having kind of taught through it last year. I'm sure that we probably already have some good experiential perspective and feedback that we get from our own teachers. So thank you for that.
Sure, great. And then one other question. So I would imagine, but I'm not totally clear on this, that there may be some students who would be permitted to not wear masks for medical reasons or any other reason. Are there protocols in place to protect those students from being constantly reminded by teachers in the hallway or out at lunchtime that they need to put their masks on, which can become burdensome for a student, or something that could be discussed with the building principals about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's to date, we have, as far as I understand, we do not have any students that fall into that category, at least not been brought to my attention, but I think that's an excellent point is how is that addressed? So that, that people understand that there is a medical accommodation there. So it's an excellent question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. That was it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rothstein and Vice President Tunnicliffe.
Oh, thank you. If I can ask a follow-on to Mr. Rothstein's question about that, in terms of identifying students who may be medically fragile and not being able to wear the mask, is there something we need to be concerned about in terms of FERPA laws and just something to think about as you're investigating that? Because we wouldn't want to violate any of the existing FERPA laws if a child has a medical condition. So
I really appreciate those questions. I mean, they are outstanding and they're admittedly not questions that have come up previously in our conversation. So thank you for those. I will absolutely follow up with the principals.
let me see. Nope, I thought it was a very thorough summary and I appreciate it. I don't think I have any more questions. President Trigg-Scales.
Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliffe. Dr. Cascone, I have a couple of questions and they're somewhat related.
Yes, ma'am.
One, we know that we'll be receiving students shortly who have not been in school in a year. They did not come back for hybrid, along with students who did return for hybrid. Are our teachers prepared to deal with the anxiety and the newness of coming back to school? everyone will not be equal as they come into the classroom based on their experiences from the year before. So that's part of the question about the anxiety and accounting for the differences in the experiences that our students have gone through last year. And the other part of the question is, what happens if students don't show up day one, day two, day three? What additional resources are we putting in place to follow up with those students? I know that phone calls can be made, but in this instance, it may be something much more serious than I just missed the first day of school. If we are dealing with anxiety or trauma or quarantine, whatever the reason may be, just wanting to know what additional resources are in place in that regard.
Thank you for those questions, President Trigg-Scales. So I can tell you that just from a kind of a 30,000 foot view of that, this premise, this message of exactly of what you speak, President Trigg-Scales, that we need to be attentive, we need to be observant, we need to be warm, we need to be welcoming, we need to be flexible, kind, right? In those opening days, that is a message. I do believe that it is a message that, regardless of me emphasizing that on the first day and the principals emphasizing on the first day, and I do think it's worthy of emphasizing. I do think that it's a place that teachers are coming from. That they understand that, because on some level they, as adult professionals, sort of harbor those same types of reservations as well, right? I think the reality of it is that we have dealt with school avoidance in the past. I think the difference is just, could the scale and the scope of it be just larger than what we've seen in the past? And so when a student obviously is, we're seeing a student's not attending for multiple days, obviously there's going to be outreach depending upon the level, principal, guidance counselor, teacher. And I think that goes in one of two directions. Either, and let me just preface this by saying, I don't say this with even a hint of judgment or criticism, but just it goes in one of two directions. Either where contact happens with the parents and we're engaging openly with the parents, they're engaging openly with us and sort of sharing, yes, really like struggling with this. And so what might we do? I think one of the things is to provide some sort of a kind of a gradual introduction into school, right? So that's one of the most useful strategies is, well, let's try coming in just part of the day. Or let's come in for maybe the student's favorite part of the day, or let the student come in, after school and just meet the teacher. So I think any of these strategies could be used if a student was coming in. I think, if for whatever reason we're having difficulty engaging with the parents, it obviously becomes a lot more challenging. Is it a question of language, right? So is this a case where we need to engage our, one of our bilingual parent liaisons to conduct some outreach? Do we need to partner with a community organization, a social services organization to assist us with that? In some cases, do we need to do safety checks at the home? So it could take all different forms, but I think the key is that we're identifying those kids and conducting outreach early on, and then kind of developing differentiated plans to try and get them to come in. But again, I think patient, recognizing that getting them back in and making sure that they feel comfortable once they're in and they're going to stay in. But those would just be a few top of mind thoughts.
Okay, thank you. I was just talking to a parent the other day, and he was sharing that his two children had not been in school, and they were sort of looking forward to coming back, but they were very, very anxious about the prospect of returning. So
Yeah.
I just want to be sure that teachers, and I place great value in what our teachers do. So I am not in any way questioning their sensitivity and what they normally do, but these aren't normal times. So just want to be sure that we're realizing that some students have not been to school. They've just not been there.
Yeah.
And this is the first time in a very long time that they're coming back. So that was basically that question.
That's a good question.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Dr. Cascone. It was a very thorough walkthrough. And let's see if we have questions from the public who are here with us on agenda items only. And we ask that you kindly give your name and your address, and you will have 3 minutes to address the board. Don't all rush up at once. Thank you.
Sandra White, 16 Bundes Road, West Orange.
And excuse me, you may remove your mask at the
Oh.
mic. Thank you.
My question is about lunch at the high school, because it's thousands of students. And is it still going to be just one period, everybody at one time? But then I know you brought up about the tent, so is that part of the solution?
Okay, thank you. We'll answer that shortly.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Sandra Mordecai, Pleasant Valley Way. On agenda items, I am sorry to see Mr. Joyce will leave, as he's probably the only Black male in that elementary building, or maybe the only one in all 7 elementary schools. I hope you're working hard on not just diversity hire, but also retention. Also in hiring, I'm happy to see Dr. Pilar's name on the agenda for a sub-position. Her mentorship and counsel of anyone she comes across in the district is a plus. So hopefully you'll be reaching out to her. I'm looking at the hiring for Dr. Pollins. In just Googling her name, she has a consulting service where she's attached to the Jersey Charter School Partnerships, Hamilton Charter School. And I'm just a little amazed that you're hiring somebody who's basically going to be moonlighting because she has her own business. Is she going to set that aside and focus strictly on West Orange's 7,000 students? And also her title includes accountability. Mrs. Granada's title also on the agenda includes accountability. That's also part of Assistant Superintendent Ebony's job description. So are we going to spend $600,000 on 3 people working on accountability? The sidebar on the agenda. I've never seen a sidebar that, number 1, includes a salary, and number 2 says the job description will be revised. The revised job description should already be approved and attached as an exhibit. My other comments I sent to you separately in an email. I won't repeat those here. For the co-curricular volunteer spots as well as part-time jobs, I hope that you're considering the 18 to 21 students. It says ticket takers, parking helpers, etc. This gives them additional work experience as opposed to grocery stores. That will broaden their career opportunities. And lastly, I'm a little surprised to see Dr. Cascone's contract on the agenda. I like you, you've worked very hard, but this is the last throes of summer. Everybody is out and about getting their dropping their college students off, getting their younger kids ready for school. And I don't know if there are questions on the Google form, but the room's empty. I'm sure people would come to say great things about you if they knew this. And also my other comment is, As Mrs. Triggscales is lame duck, I'm surprised that she's signing anything. That has not been the normal practice of any Board of Ed that I know of, and not in my 10 years. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Good evening. I
Good
think you
evening.
can hear me well enough through this mask. My name is Elmani Vani, 184 for 186 Forest Hill Road. Sorry, long day. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the comments about social emotional when it comes to our youth and Dr. Cascone from what we talked about, strict scales and everyone. To just I want to take this in one other angle. I do believe that teachers should have long-term PLC or PD directed strictly for this year, and even setting aside academic PD and PLC. And here's the reason why, Ms. Trixell, you said it correctly. We are in abnormal times. The reality is that the coronavirus did not hit young people when we first came back hybrid, as it is now with the Delta variant hitting young people today. And a couple of things that we have to keep in mind is the impact of not just anxiety, but children that do get it and have to isolate, because they're going to have to isolate in their rooms. And we have to understand what the mental impact can be on them from that. The other aspect of that is we do not know what, even when they recover, what long COVID could be for children, as well as other things. And this is some of the things we have to train teachers on, looking out for multi-inflammatory syndrome, though rare, and it is rare, thank God, but those are some things that could potentially happen to a young child, especially in your K through 5, anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks afterwards. When you talk about things like that, when you talk about even anxieties on parents and on families, I think that's critical. The other thing is, let's also remember, the holidays are going to come up. We already know that holidays in and by themselves offer a time of depression. And now we're going to be dealing with families that we don't know which families have lost someone. I will tell you, in my district, amongst my students, I went an entire week where I had 4 of my students lose their fathers that week alone. And so once again, when we're coming up on this time period, let's keep in mind that kids may not be there mentally, emotionally. I think that's going to be important. Masks for young people that cannot get vaccinated, I strongly suggest, if the district can get the KN95. Number one, these are breathable. I have them for my daughter, my son. They're incredibly breathable, talkative. My daughter was in a theater for 4 weeks. Within it, worked like a charm. Okay, but I think for the younger children, I say for all children, they should go do the KN95 mask, but especially for those that do not have masks, are not able to be vaccinated. 2 last things I just need 20 more seconds if it's okay. I think that the first, is that okay? 20 more seconds?
Yeah, I can't see the clock.
Oh, it just
so-
went to 0.
Okay.
I just need 20 more seconds. I do appreciate the following from this board. I oversee a lot of different districts and what's happening there, and especially those in Florida. And I have to commend this board. I want to commend you for doing the absolute best of being very pragmatic about us coming back. It still hurts me to know about that young, beautiful 3rd grader that died in Florida, and the policy they had and then quickly reversed. And I'm like, a child's life should not be the barometer for our politics or our policies.
you.
So I really appreciate that. I'm glad it's keeping in. I say this, Dr. Cascone, to my fellow educators, let's make the first 4 weeks as assessment free as possible. Let's give
Okay,
kids a
thank
chance
you.
to breathe in. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Good evening, Brian Rock, 63
evening.
Rock Spring Avenue. So one question, two comments. The question, following up on Ms. Schwartz's question about medically fragile students. I know at the last meeting, one of the board members had asked about whether or not we had any data in-house about how many people might ask for some kind of accommodation. Noticed it on the agenda tonight. The nursing plan has a whole bunch of identified students with medical issues. I wondered if we had any data compiled out of that of what percentage or what number of those students might end up needing an accommodation to be educated at home. In terms of comments, I heard you say for the testing piece that we were looking at possibly providing testing to community members, to parents. I think that's a great idea. Just want to encourage that if we can. Neighborhood elementary school is the heart of a community in a lot of ways, and anytime that we can meet a community need at that community center is great. So I think that's an excellent idea. And lastly, just thank you for getting us to this point. Last couple of months, I remember sitting here listening to Dr. Casco and talk about how we're going to get to full in-person instruction eventually, right? There might be some curveballs along the way in terms of the governor's guidance. And we heard a lot of doubt throughout the community that we'd ever get here, that the plan wasn't ready, that it wasn't full enough. And so I'm just thankful that it's done, it's here. May not be perfect, but I think it's pragmatic enough that we can be in school safely in about a week. And so I hope to have a nice school year that's as normal as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions from the floor? All right. Thank you all for sharing your questions, and we would ask Dr. Cascone to address these first before we, excuse me. We will ask Dr. Cascone to address these first before we do
Sure.
the others.
Sure.
Thank you.
So for Ms. White, thank you for that question. I can tell you that the high school administration has been working extremely hard on this plan. I've continued to kind of, serve as a sounding board for them, and really, the endeavor has been, how can we have 2,000 students eat safely at the same time? So last I spoke with them, they felt that they had enough locations where they could do that. And that's gyms, the cafeterias, obviously. Admittedly, I have not followed up with them since late last week, but I also have not heard from them. So what we've also done is they've indicated that they need additional staff to, as a number of the elementary schools have as well. As we have additional locations, we need additional lunch aides, or in this particular case, a part-time security guard to help oversee the spaces. So my understanding is that the students will all be in separate locations and will be appropriately and safely spaced in those locations. Thank you for that comment about the N95s. We actually just got an email from the county that the state is providing access to N95s. I spoke with Nick Allegrino and the OEM, West Orange OEM. So we're going to be getting a large shipment of those that we can, our younger students can utilize. Relative to Mrs. Mordecai's comments, I do believe that relative to the comment about my contract would really be more appropriate for the board president to address. As far as Mr. Joycel, yes, I mean, we were terribly sorry to see Mr. Joycel go. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Joycel. He's going to the Fire Academy and is going to become a West Orange fireman. So that was something to which he had aspired. And so certainly we wish him well. And he was very thankful and appreciative and complimentary of the time that he had been here and served in West Orange, and we of him. He's an outstanding young man and was an outstanding teacher and coach. Relative to the comments with regard to Dr. Pollins, all I can say is that it is not a violation of New Jersey Administrative Code for a person administrator to have a private endeavor. Obviously, all administrators and board members are required to file the school finance ethics form, which ensures that There is not an intermingling of those interests. In terms of focusing on West Orange, I can tell you that as the superintendent, that's really my responsibility to ensure that the people that are employed by the board are performing their job-approved job descriptions, their board-approved job descriptions appropriately and to the fullest extent. And that's what I will continue to do. As far as the sidebar goes, I mean, I have to acknowledge that that ideally, there, I have to agree with Mrs. Mordecai. Technically speaking, it is preferred practice for the job description to have been brought forward to the board in advance of the actual sidebar, though there's certainly nothing, impermissible about doing it at the same time, provided that the board has had ample opportunity to review both and did not feel that they had further questions with regard to the job description that would preclude them from voting effectively relative to the sidebar. But of course, that motion is yet to be voted on, questions yet to be asked. So we'll see how that goes. As far as my contract, I would defer to the board president.
Thank you, Dr. Cascon.
You're welcome.
And I just wanted to mention too, yes, we're very delighted that Dr. Pilara has agreed to come back and be a substitute for us. She's worth her weight in gold. So this is certainly a wonderful thing for us. As far as Dr. Cascon's contract is concerned, this is something that last year's board discussed and agreed that we were going to do. I think you know that there were quite a number of things going on last year that we didn't get to it. And so we're just getting to it now. Contractually, his anniversary is July. And so this was the appropriate time to talk about his contract and to make a recommendation. This by law, and we checked with our attorney and we checked with the Essex County superintendent, and we knew that we had to raise this, was it 10 days? 30 day? 30 day and a 10 day notice. And so we have followed all of those legal requirements to get to this point today. So the public was notified at our last public meeting that this would be coming up at this meeting tonight. And you're right, Mrs. Mordecai, there are probably loads of people out there who would like to say wonderful things. And believe it or not, we get lots of emails where people say just that. I think I mentioned at the last board meeting that Dr. Cascone has not had a normal year since he got here. And so that had a lot to do with the board's desire to extend his contract. Mrs. Mordecai, you were certainly on the board when he was hired, offered a 4-year contract. And so with only 2 years under his belt and not a normal year yet. And as much as we want this one to be normal coming up, it's not entirely normal. And so we felt that it would be prudent to extend Dr. Cascone's contract for an additional year and to offer him a 2% raise annually starting in July. And so the board is at this point this evening, and we'll see how we vote. Okay, so now we'll move on to Mrs. Flowers and questions that have come in from the public electronically.
Thank you, President Trixgills. We do have 3 submissions from the Google Doc. The first one, my apologies if I pronounced the person's name incorrectly.
You may take your mask off, it might be easier.
Okay, the first one is from Ms. Sarah Caceres, 14 Knollwood Drive. As a district, I know you have taken every step you can to make being in schools as safe as possible. However, as COVID evolves, we must adjust with it. In light of the Delta variant, increased cases in our town, state hospitalizations at their highest since the winter surge and the increase in cases seen with school openings around the country, it seems we are sending our kids into certain exposure at school. Is there consideration for a remote option for kids under 12 until they can be vaccinated?
Thank you for that. That's okay. Thank you for that question. The Governor Murphy's executive order presently does not, notwithstanding some of the points that Ms. Casares made, does not allow for virtual instruction other than in cases of quarantine, medical fragility, or pre-existing medical conditions that would put the children in danger of complications with the contraction of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Cascone. The next submission is from Ms. Sharice Ferguson, 897 Pleasant Valley Way. COVID testing, will schedule or random testing be conducted at the schools? Recently, a Newark charter school went completely remote due to several staff members testing positive during routine biweekly COVID testing. Is this something West Orange is considering? Thanks.
Regular testing of all staff members is not presently something that our reopening plan accounts for. We obviously will test all unvaccinated staff members weekly and test students upon request and when needed, but is not the school district's intention at this time to have a uniform testing protocol that would involve large numbers of students. Now, with the partnering with a testing provider that we're doing, particularly the one that I'm leaning towards at this point in time, my understanding from that provider is that they do have that capacity, right? So if we got to a point where the level of transmission in our community rose to a level where we felt that were prudent, we would have the capacity to expand to that. But that is not something that is part of the school's reopening plan at this juncture.
Okay, thank you. And our final submission is from Ms. Krista Ponsalon, 19 Colony Drive East. Sure. Okay. She has 5 questions, so Dr. Cascone, you'll answer one at a time. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Cascone, our school principals, and the board for all your work in getting our kids back to school and keeping them safe. With the Delta variant being more contagious and more dangerous, according to a recent UK study, our kids are at greater risk than ever. COVID hospitalizations are the highest they've ever been for children. With this in mind, I have additional questions about policies this school year. Number 1, will COVID testing be implemented for students? I know other districts have arranged for mobile testing stations weekly and believe this would be beneficial.
You know, I think I answered that question previously. I'll just say the premise, and I'm not sure which communities, the premise of testing 7,000 students on a weekly basis, it's hard for me to wrap my head around the logistics of that, as well as the compliance. You know, when we send, and again, let me again preface this by saying this is not a criticism. I think it's just simply a reality, which is that when we send out solicitations for information, our response rate is anywhere between the high 30s to low 40s at best. So what happens if, you know, 60% of the students don't go? Are we forbidding them entrance into the school? I see a lot of logistic challenges with that. To me, I'd rather focus our energies on the health and safety protocols we have in our schools, being hyper vigilant about our protocols in our schools, and to ask similarly of our community that they remain hyper vigilant relative to the health of their own children in terms of whether or not to actually send them into school. That's kind of where we are now. Again, it's not to say that we might not pivot in the event of increased transmission, but it's just not part of the plan at this time.
Second question, with upgrades to ventilation, how many times per hour is there an air exchange in classrooms?
The air exchange is approximately 2.5 times, 2.5 times or more in our rooms. When combined with the the ionization units that we have, this would certainly qualify as adequate and aligned with the requirements.
Are recommendations being given to families about how to choose a mask, how to make sure it fits properly, and if need be, assistance to afford proper masks? This is an equity issue and all children deserve to be as safe as possible.
I think that was sort of addressed with the N95s and having access to those for any children who may need them. I will make a note of that, Ms. Punsalan, in my communication to the community. It's sort of that like checklist of key points with some resources on masks. I can include that in my correspondence. So thank you for that.
What is considered a close contact? If someone tests positive in our child's classroom, will we automatically be notified? What are the parameters around when a class or child needs to quarantine due to exposure?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not a director of health or a physician, and so I would just preface my remarks by saying that anytime we have a confirmed case, that immediately initiates an interactive process between our district physician and the local Department of Health, our school nurse, where we gather as much information as we can in order to inform the contact tracing procedure. Obviously, and here's where it gets nuanced, because there's a difference between vaccinated or unvaccinated. Now, obviously, for students under 12, that's moot because they can't get vaccinated. But for our students 12 or older, it would. And so in contact tracing interviews with students 12 or over, that would be a key question that we would ask the parent, guardian, or caretaker, was whether the child had been vaccinated. And obviously, in situations like that, we would, if they indicated that the child had been vaccinated, we would request, the official documentation that occurred, because that would drive whether or not that child that young person needed to quarantine. But my understanding is that it is anyone within a 6-foot radius of the person who tested positive, right? So any students that were seated within 6 feet, obviously that's easier to do on the elementary level because students have limited interaction. The scope of that quarantine would obviously be more extensive on the secondary level, where those students were in 7 or 8 different classes. The way that would work would be a letter would be sent to the directly to the members of that school community. In that regard, there could be more targeted communication to the parents of that class, and all COVID-19 case notification letters will be posted to the district website for public record.
Okay, thank you. And finally, on days.
Oh, I'm sorry, and the dashboard, and the dashboard. Ms. Huerta had asked that question last time. So the COVID-19 dashboard, which will be operational again this year.
On days when it is deemed too hot to wear masks, will parents be notified prior to arrival at school? Many parents are not comfortable with our children being indoors, unmasked, and would prefer to keep our children home on those days. Again, thank you for all of your work and dedication to the children and families of West Orange.
I think I had answered that earlier, which would be we would more than likely go for an early dismissal during excessive heat. And I would thank Ms. Punsalan for her questions and for her kind regards.
Thank you, Mrs. Flowers, and thank you, Dr. Cascone. And now we will move into item number 9, reports, discussions, and recommendations. And I would like to entertain a motion for items 1 through 8, which includes attachments 2 through 8. Is there a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Ms. Merklinger. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliff. Any discussion? Personnel items 1 to 8, attachments 2 to 8.
I had a question.
Yes, Ms. Huerta.
Item F. That's page 5.
I'm sorry.
Item F, page 5,
Okay.
where I was looking at the co-curricular assignments, team leader assignments, and I think I'm looking at the correct, right?
Take your mask off if you don't mind, because I can't even understand.
My apologies. I
That's
forgot.
okay.
So I was looking at the co-curricular activities and the team leader assignments. That is item F, attachment 4. And I did notice that there was 36 programs for Roosevelt and only 26 programs for Liberty. They don't have the equal amount of programs, and one school's population is higher than the other. So I was just wondering what the discrepancies were, why one has more programs or clubs and the other doesn't.
Right. I think I know the answer, but all right. I'll take a shot at it. In some cases, based on the preference of the principal and the staff, they split some of the stipends for some of the activities. So you may see that there are 2 or 3 staff members who are doing the same task that only one task member is doing at another school. So that's all I've got.
That's a good start. We'll do a tag team on this.
All
one.
right, all right.
Interestingly, see, in West Orange, there's within the collective bargaining agreement of the WOEA, there is the ability to pay stipends for sort of trial clubs, and then if enrolled adequately and successful, then they are kind of promoted to full-time clubs. Now, this process can occur between collective bargaining agreements, which means that in a particular school, you could have the formation, the founding of a club that becomes formal from the standpoint of being dispersed a stipend before it's actually formalized into the collective bargaining agreement under the co-curricular schedules. And that's why you see sometimes a difference in clubs between one school or the other. What really needs to happen is that clubs need to be consistent across both schools, but that's something that can only really be done through the actual formal collective bargaining process, which I should say is currently on, well, you know what's going on, that's ongoing to tell you, oh yeah, and I'll tell you that. So I can't really say more than that at this time relative to those negotiations, but that's a little bit more perspective.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? There being none, Mrs. Flowers, please.
Mrs. Huerta,
Yes.
Mrs. Merklinger,
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
Vice President Tunnicliff,
Yes.
President Trick Scales.
Yes.
Thank you.
And under personnel, number 9, public hearing for superintendent's employment contract, which is attachment 9. And I will repeat what's different here, and then I will ask one of my fellow board members to please read the resolution there. But we have added 1 year to the current contract, and we are adding a 2% increase, which is effective this year for the duration of the contract, which ends on June 30th, 2024. So may I get someone who would like to read the resolution on the top of page 7.
I'll read it.
Thank you. Ms. Huerta?
So resolve that the board approve and amend an amended contract of employment for Dr. J. Scott Cascone commencing July 11th, 2019 through June 30th, 2024, which has been reviewed and approved by the County Executive Superintendent on August 24th, 2021, in accordance with NJSA 18A 7-AJ, and in compliance with the standards adopted by the Commissioner of Education at NJAC 6A 23A-3.1, attachment 9.
Thank you. And now I'd like to entertain comments from the public, if there are any at this time. There being none, may I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliff. Second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Merklinger. Any discussion? Mrs. Flowers, please do the honors.
Mrs. Huerta,
Yes.
Mrs. Merklinger,
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
Vice President Tunnicliff,
Yes.
President Trigg Scales.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. So, Dr. Cascone, congratulations. We're keeping you for an extra year.
I appreciate that.
Okay, see, we had to check with you first. And to Ms. Mordecai's question, perhaps that's why it didn't happen last year. We were trying to figure out, is he or is he not? So we're happy that you are.
I'm certainly honored that you feel that way.
We are delighted. Thank you. And now we're moving on to B, curriculum and instruction. Under curriculum instruction, we have items 1, 2, 3, and we're also going to include finance, C, A, and B. Is there a motion to approve? Oh, and I see we have some donations there.
Yes, President Trigg Scales?
Yes.
I just want to, did you want to call attention to that? You go, Ms. Merklinger?
Sure, we are going to motion, or I'd like to ask to motion to table under C, finance, item, under A, item number 2, the school nurses plan. I know we want to have some further discussion amongst the board about some of the data that was in there. So
Correct.
just asking if we could table that until the September 20th meeting.
Yes. All right. So there's a motion to table that item. So let's take care of that first. Mrs. Flowers, would you do us the honors, please?
Okay, so I have a motion and a second for that, for tabling.
Is there a
Yes,
motion?
I'll-
A second.
I'll
We had a
second- I'll
motion.
second the
Right.
motion.
Okay.
Okay,
thank
Mr.
you.
Rothstein.
Okay, and then a vote. Mrs. Huerta,
Yes.
Mrs. Merklinger,
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
Vice President Tunnicliff,
Yes.
President Trigg Scales.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then, as I said, back to the donations, item number 6. We're really pleased and thankful and grateful. The West Orange Rotary Club donated backpacks to both Redwood School and Kelly School. The World Organization for Positive Action donated backpacks to both Hazel School and Washington School. And the Friendly Sons of the Shillelagh Essex Division donated backpacks to Edison School. So we thank those organizations very, very much. And we know that our families and that our students will greatly appreciate those as this wonderful new school year commences. All right, so is there a motion barring attachments 11 and 12 to approve curriculum and instruction and finance?
All motion.
Thank you, Ms. Merklinger. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliff. Any discussion?
I did have a few questions on the New Jersey Consortium for Gifted and Talented Programs.
Mhm.
I wanted to find out, I know I'm excited that we're continuing this and wanted to see, is there additional PD that will be done after this program to roll this out to the teachers that are not being able to attend this? And then I wanted to better understand what our goals are for continuing with this program, the involvement with this program, and what we're looking at in the next couple of years. And are there opportunities through this program to collaborate with other districts, that our students actually get an opportunity to collaborate through the gifted and talented?
Excellent questions, Vice President Tunnicliffe. And I can certainly, answer some of those, all of them to some extent. So through our membership in this consortium, what the kind of the typical or standard activities, if you will, is that our gifted and talented, our HAP teachers, and any administrators, including principals who might have hands on or in that program, have the opportunity to attend monthly meetings of the consortium. Those monthly meetings typically involve, basically communing with other teachers and administrators from other school districts. There's typically either a kind of a best practice presentation that comes from one of the member participants and work that they're doing in their district, or sometimes it is presenters coming from outside the organization to present on programs or PD. And then, of course, there are statewide conferences, and there are opportunities, yes, for students to be privy to and then participate in student competitions. And having done some work with participated in the consortium in my previous district, my previous role, the gifted and talented teachers are really not, as you're probably not surprised, really creative at being proactive about finding opportunities for collaboration between districts and things of that nature. I think in terms of what those folks who go from our district do with it when they come back, above and beyond contributing to their own practice, I think is there's room for strategic planning in that regard. And I think it connects to really our ongoing efforts this year to really take a look at our gifted program, to look at our honors program, and look at those programs and really evaluate them against what are kind of noted best practices within the profession about those types of programs. Where are we in alignment? Where are we not? Right. And so how are we, final point, Ms. Tunnicliffe, how are we taking kind of the essence of gifted and talented instruction and infusing that into the classroom for the benefit of all students, particularly in the lower grades where students are not being pulled out for gifted and talented? I would certainly see these staff members, our teachers, playing a key role in that. And maybe that's part of the pivot that happens moving forward, is that these teachers take on just as much of a coaching role with classroom teachers as they do a direct instructional role with students. But all of that in the second half of that answer is sort of just kind of evolving and on our roadmap. I think the first half of the question just answers more specifically what you could expect that they would be doing while there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion, questions?
I just had a comment.
Mrs. Weird.
Yes, I had a comment. I know we thanked a lot of our donors, but one donor that's not on here that I'm not sure if it's in a forthcoming next, agenda or another, but Bethany Church also donated some backpacks to Washington Elementary School, and so they just had received them, and so I know it didn't probably make it to this agenda, but I did want to thank Bethany Church for donating, because they do donate to Edison as well. So thank you.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that recognition. And Dr. Cascone, I guess we will have that in our formal agenda for next time, once it's
Any excuse to call and talk with Pastor Zach. I'm in.
yes. I have a question for you, Mrs. Flowers, and It's in the bills list, and it's pages 29 to 35. And it's transportation in lieu of. And I wanted to know if you could explain for everyone's benefit why the amounts vary. And again, explain to us what that is and how often these payments are made and to whom. If you would, please, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Trixcales. The aid in lieu payments that you see on the bills list, they're varying amounts because they are for last year for parents that did not receive transportation for their child because they were requested not to ride the bus. They're going to private schools or in our area where we provide transportation. We will give them aid in lieu. So they have to submit applications to let us know, and then the schools have to confirm their attendance. So because last year we were in a hybrid year, the amounts vary because of the calculation is based on the number of days that the student attended the school in person only. In normal years, pre-pandemic, it would have just been a flat amount that's paid twice a year. So previous years, it was $1,000. So the payments are made mid-year, usually February for the first portion of the year. And then again, usually around June, July, depending on when the applications are done. And that would have been for the second half of the year. These payments are being processed a little later than normal because of the delay with the processing of the paperwork and getting the attendance from the schools. And again, the calculations are different because of this hybrid, this number of days that the students attended in person.
So you actually had to get the schools to confirm which days the students actually rode the bus?
Yes, absolutely. The number of days they
Wow.
attended in person, and those applications.
Oh, attended in person?
In person only.
Not on a bus?
They rode the bus, yes. They
Oh.
went to school, took the transportation to the school and had in-person instruction. Not if they were home virtual. They only got paid for the days they physically took the bus to school. And
Well, that had to be extremely time consuming and, okay, so this is last year.
This is last year's, yes. These payments
This
are
is
delayed.
all last year. All
All
these pages
Yes.
are last year.
Yes.
So you get to do that again?
Yes, and hopefully this year will be a little different because now the fully virtual option is off the table, hybrid's off the table. So now it should hopefully go back to a normal.
So the next round of reimbursements would be in February?
In February for the first half of the school year,
Right.
correct?
Okay, okay, thank you. I was trying to figure it out by myself, but that didn't work. So thank you. All righty. So I think we're ready for a vote.
Okay. Mrs. Huerta,
Yes.
Mrs. Merklinger,
Yes.
Mr. Rothstein,
Yes.
Vice President Tunnicliff,
Yes.
President Trixfield.
Yes.
Thank you.
And that brings us up to petitions and hearings of citizens on any topic. It does not have to be an agenda item. But again, I remind you that you have 3 minutes and we ask you that you kindly give us your name, address, and please step up to the podium and don't all rush it once. But we'd love to have you. Okay, I don't see a huge crowd headed our way, so we'll shift to the Google Docs questions.
No additional questions on the Google form.
Oh, my goodness. What time is it?
Just after 9.
I don't know what to do with myself.
Can I make a motion to extend the meeting?
Okay. Okay, so we're going to move to reports from the board president and or board members. And so Ms. Huerta.
Thank you, President Trixcales. So I don't really have so much to go over report. PR committee, we have not solidified any particular details with the board on forthcoming PR work, but we do intend on getting that together. Yes, so it is coming. New Jersey School Board Association, I was able to attend a training on the perils of electronic communication. As we all know, we're very mindful and of our constituency, and that the people want to know what we say and or what, our work and our opinion. However, there are things that as board members, we cannot always comment or discuss and disclose. So in order to protect ourselves and protect the board and the district, these are trainings that I think are really insightful, very helpful. And I, being of a certain generation that is very much into social media, take much care in, how I yield that access. They are having another training, county meeting that will be tomorrow. If anybody is available, you can still sign up. It will be tomorrow at in the morning. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the time. We were able to attend, I, myself, and President Chick Scales were at the Haiti prayer vigil this past weekend, was it? The days are just blurring out for me. And it was a very heartfelt vigil. There were a lot of very passionate speakers there. And our prayers go out to all of the people of Haiti and of other countries that are going through difficulty, and even within our own country, and just ask everyone to have grace for each other. That's all. And I'm glad to hear about the new theme. And now we can start, sharing that with our family and friends and school community. Return, reconnect, reimagine. Thank you.
Sort of like reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay, and Mrs. Marklinger.
Sure. Melinda touched on PR already. No new updates from the town council side. Gary's going to touch on policy updates. So really the only thing that I just wanted to mention is that our Mountaineer End Zone Club is doing a Blue Out for our season home opener. So please reach out to them if you are interested in attending. It's September 10th is the first home game. But this weekend they do open up. We're fortunate that our football team gets to participate and play at Montclair State against a nationally ranked team, St. Peter's Prep. So should be a really great game. We have a lot of star athletes coming back. That game is this Friday at 8 o'clock. Tickets are on sale through Eventbrite. I think there's a link on the football and Mountaineer End Zone Club Instagram and Facebook pages. So definitely check that out. Get your tickets ahead of time. And like I said, the Blue Out is the first home opener. So as we start opening up school and more events come out, definitely we'll make sure we mention them, but definitely always check our social media pages, our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Board of Ed website, because all of this information is always there. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Marklinger. And Mr. Rothstein.
Thank you very much. Cheryl and I met with Dr. Cascone to regroup on policies and reassess where we're at and what the plan is moving forward. And so with the help of Mrs. Hughes, we identified 57 remaining policies that need to be approved. For you history buffs out there, I have a list of 57 policies. All right, that joke didn't go over so well. Thank you. Of those 57 policies, 39 of them, the administration intends to push forward on the September 20th agenda for a second reading. So that's, roughly 2/3 of what's remaining to be approved. So take those out, that leaves 18 policies. The 18 policies remaining, Cheryl and I are looking at independently. We're regrouping on Friday to make sure that we have clearly defined what we believe needs to be changed in those policies, so that we can then push those forward for a second reading, both a marked up version and a clean version, so that the board will be clear on what it is that we're asking to be approved as it's been changed. So that's where we stand on policy. I also just wanted to say congratulations to Dr. Cascone on the contract extension and wishing you good fortune and a lot of success both for you and for our school district in the upcoming years.
Thank you, Mr. Rothstein. And I am so happy to hear about policy. Big smile, big smile. And Vice President Tinsley.
Thank you. I don't have a formal report tonight, but I did want to say that it's nice to see some normal activity coming back. And I got to see my first year as a marching band parent, got to preview the marching band show last week after the camp, and it looks great. And I'm excited to see them perform in full in a few weeks. And I had the opportunity today to attend with President Trig Scales and Melinda Huerta, the CJ Morgan Foundation golf outing. We went to the brunch, and it was always good to see friends there, and the great work that the foundation is doing, raising funds for scholarships for our students. So the Morgans are looking to expand. So a lot of good things happening there. And I also just wanted to note, somebody had tagged me in a Facebook question. I thought I'd mention it publicly, that they were wondering when the Google form goes live for the questions. And it is posted with the agenda and the attachments on the Friday before the meeting on Monday. So once the board approves the agenda, then it gets pushed out. And at the same time, you're able to access the Google form to ask your questions for those who can't be at the meeting. And also congratulations to Dr. Cascone. We're excited to have you with us for another year, and may these next few years be more normal than the first two. So, and that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliffe. We did table the nurses plan, but I just want to take this opportunity to thank our nurses. School is starting. They've been working during the summer, looking at student records and individual health plans and all of that. And we often don't realize the responsibilities that fall upon the shoulders of our school nurses. And, you know, they're working with our medically fragile students, our nursing dependent students, our medically complex students. And then there's students who just have health concerns. And then on top of that, what happens on a day-to-day basis. So I just wanted to, on behalf of the board, send a shout out to our school nurses and thank you so much for all that you do. And the Nikhil Badlani Foundation event is going to take place on September 19th. And I have signed up to be on Dr. Cascone's team. Anyone else here sign up? Okay, sign up. We need you on the team, right?
Mentioned that that's the competitive run, right? To
Yes.
Person for Scholarship.
Did you say that before or after I
Right.
signed up? So, you know, just really, really important to celebrate all the good things that the foundation has done and to stop for Nikhil and help save lives. So if you haven't registered for that, please do so. And yes, this afternoon was a very pleasant time to remember CJ Morgan and to spend time with his family and all of those who support him. And Dr. Cascone, of course, was there along with the three of us. And there were some very moving moments where I doubt that there was a dry eye there, but can't believe it's been 3 years. But we celebrate the life of that outstanding young man. And this morning, I had the pleasure of attending the new staff orientation, and I got to say a few words to them, the class of 2021, as I referred to them. And I told them that, you know, they're here in West Orange. This is the place where creativity and energy came together, and you need both to survive here. And, you know, it was a pleasure. It's a diverse group. And so I look forward to having them join our family. And if you're watching tonight, because I did invite them to tune in to our Emmy Award-winning public board meetings, where they would get to know the rest of the board here this evening. So welcome if you're watching, class of 2021. And with that,
President Trixfield?
yes.
May
Dr.
may I,
Cascone.
may I just say
Absolutely.
a word that I did not mention in my superintendent's report, but I just wanted to wish all, of course, I will do this again, but I just want to wish all of our staff who will be coming in this week on Wednesday, for the first time. We've been preparing all summer to receive you, and we're really looking forward to having you back. So I wish you the best for your first day. And I would have been remiss if I did not, because I know we have a lot of staff members watching. So I just wanted to give them a shout out.
Yes, yes. And Happy New Year to everyone. This is a new school year. I used to greet everybody in my last job, Happy New Year. And sometimes they would look at me cross-eyed, but it really is Happy New Year. And so we wish everyone well. And our next public board meeting will be September 20th here at West Orange High School. And is there a motion for adjournment? Thank you, Vice President Tunnicliffe. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Huerta, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, this meeting is officially adjourned. And thank you for coming and thank you for tuning in.